you not have your video on, or is it just not connecting?
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. I have one of those video covers. So that if I accidentally leave my video on during work, because I'm naked like during all of the day, because why would I wear clothes? So if I accidentally leave my video on, I don't want my coworkers to see me topless. So I have a cover as like a second level of defense, or a second line of defense against accidentally flashing my coworkers.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm Jen.
I'm Liz.
And we're Harmless Harlots.
What does that mean?
To us, it means being open to having more than one relationship, however you define it, as long as everyone gives fully informed, enthusiastic consent.
It's also an homage to our poly Bible, The Ethical Slut, which we recommend if you want to learn more.
We are enthusiasts, not experts, in this field, so if you want to learn and explore along with us, we give you our knowing, enthusiastic consent to come along. Anyway, so what's up with you?
So this is going to be one of the more raw episodes that we've done, because usually Jennifer and I record every Thursday. We have like a scheduled time, but right now Jennifer and I are both going through relationship milestones. So it's 11 a.m. on a Sunday, and I just woke up. And I woke up...
What were you doing last night?
Don't judge me. Zach and I are so bad at bedtimes. Like, we just stay up forever. Like, we just talk and talk and talk. Actually, in about 2 hours here, we're actually going to go get his ears pierced, because we decided on a whim last night. He's been talking about it for a while, and I've always been very supportive of it. But then yesterday we went on a walk with a third friend, and I asked the third friend, I was like, don't you think Zach could pull off pierced ears, like, for sure? And she was like, oh yeah, absolutely, he'd rock that. And Zach was like, all right, we have a second opinion now, we'll go do it. So we scheduled an appointment.
Okay,
so
well, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited for it. I think it's gonna look so good. Also, Zach doesn't display physical affection very often. Like, I'm definitely the more cuddly, snuggly one. But it was so sweet yesterday when I was scheduling the appointment for him. He was getting kind of nervous, and I was like putting in like what time we wanted and what we were going to pierce his lobe and all that stuff. And he came up behind me and he gave me this big hug, and he was like, you're going to come with me, right? And I was like, of course I'm going to come with you. Like, I'm scheduling. So yeah, he gave me a lovely hug, and it was super sweet and intimate. And our relationship, since we leaned into polyamory full force, our relationship has just gotten so much better. Like, I think part of why I've felt so comfortable leaning into polyamory is because he's been so encouraging, and like more so than I expected. Like, we've been doing polyamory kind of informally for over a year now because we've been sleeping together, but it hasn't been exclusive, and we've both been dating other people, and I've been sleeping with other people. So we've been doing it, but we just didn't really, call it polyamory. And then I don't know why, but like when we started this podcast, all of a sudden he was just like super into it. He was like, yeah, polyamory, this actually works really well for us. I'm really happy with it. I don't know. We've been like going through a second honeymoon phase recently, I think. And it's just been really, really great between the two of us. And
I was wondering about that. So I guess if you're saying this has been since we started the podcast, that's, incredibly recent, but does he like identify as polyamorous, or is he just like cool with you being polyamorous?
I don't know. See, identifying is a separate thing than doing, because a lot of people do things but are scared to identify as them for a long time. So I don't know if you asked him if he was polyamorous, if he would say that. He definitely says I'm polyamorous now. He did. We met up with a friend of his when we went up north for our trip, and we were walking with a friend, and he outed me as polyamorous to her. And I was like, I mean, I guess he knows that I am, and he knows I'm like not super Heidi about it. But also afterward, I was like, maybe don't just like go around telling random people. Like, we don't know who's okay with it. Like, some people think it's bad. I don't know. So he definitely like knows that I am polyamorous and is very into that. But I don't know if you asked him if he would say he is, even though he's been doing it for a year. But I don't know if he would definitely say that for sure. But yeah, I mean, sometimes we talk about like, I have a dating profile right now, and he's super lazy, but he keeps talking about wanting to make a dating profile, and I'm always like, fuck yes, let's do it. Like, I'm super down to help you make a dating profile. But we haven't done that yet. So we're definitely doing polyamory.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of a similar situation that I'm in with kind of Leah and Danny, and that, like, they both know, you know, I basically only talk about polyamory with them, and I do it all the time, so they know my feelings. And while I don't think either of them identify as it, and while neither of us, I mean, none of us are, like, physically intimate, I don't know, like, they are the two people who I'm closest to in this world, and, like,
Yeah.
you know, as we've discussed, I have lots of feelings about what is romance and what is friendship, but, like, I don't know, I kind of, in my head, I identify us as a little polycule, you know, just kind of hanging out, whether or not
Yeah.
they identify it as or not, which maybe that's unethical, but it also doesn't matter because it's just in my head.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of the other thing I've been thinking about is, like, we've talked about this before, but, like, as a mathematician, I'm always thinking of the world in terms of models, and, like, labels for things are really just a model to help you understand your lived experience. And so I think it's totally fine to, like, in your personal lived experience, use labels in your head. When you use them with other people, you obviously need to, like, make sure the other person's okay with it and, like, see what they're comfortable with projecting out to the rest of the world. But, like, yeah, I also, like, I have several girlfriends who we don't have sex or anything, and I'm not even attracted to these girlfriends, but we're very, very close. But a lot of them I would, like, in my head kind of consider my partners. Like, I rely on them for a lot of emotional support. I supply them with a lot of emotional support. Like, we have very, very intimate relationships. So in my mind, like, they are my partners as much as Zach is my partner.
Yeah.
But I don't say that to other people because other people would be like, oh, so you're fucking then. And it's like, well, no. But
Yeah.
Anywho, so the reason we are doing this raw recording, Jennifer and I are very good at getting off topic and just talking about random things. I woke up, gosh, 10:55 is when I texted him back, so I probably woke up less than half an hour ago, so this is going to be a real raw recording. But I woke up this morning to a text from Fred, and for the listeners, if you haven't listened to episode 3, Lizzie's Lovers, go back and listen to that to find out who Fred is. But Fred essentially was one of my 3 partners at one point in time a few weeks ago. But Fred was my newest partner, and in the episode I talked about how Fred currently identified as monogamous, and I anticipated he would continue identifying that way, and it probably wasn't going to work. And in episode 4 or 5, I don't remember which one, we did talk about how Fred and I decided that he was monogamous and he wasn't comfortable with polyamory, so we're going to continue to be friends. And it's been hard because he's going through a lot of struggle because he really wanted to have a romantic relationship, but I think he realized that he couldn't handle the jealousy because he describes himself as a very jealous person. So it's been really hard for him. But yeah, that was a couple of weeks ago. I think that we ended things romantically, but we've been really good friends. We still send each other the occasional memes. Like, I've been taking it slow because I don't want to invade his personal space while he heals, but we've still had a really quality friendship the last couple of weeks while we haven't been romantic. So this morning when I woke up 20 minutes ago or whenever it was, I woke up to a novel of a text message. And I can say that because he himself describes the text message as a novel. It is so long. It is like you have to swipe your finger several times to get through the whole thing, which I love about him. Like, he sends beautiful text messages. He's very in tune with his feelings and very good about communicating them. Sometimes I do wish he had told me earlier about how much me being polyamorous was affecting him, because I think he did try to kind of hide that in the beginning because he didn't want to be hurt by it, but he was. And he admitted that. Part of what he said in this message was he was like, I should have been more forward about what I was feeling, and maybe if I had been, things would have worked out, and he regrets that. But anyway, in this text message this morning, when we ended things, we basically said, like, we really like each other, but it's just not going to work romantically because you're monogamous and I'm polyamorous, and there's not a relationship style that's going to make us happy, because, like, you are not going to be happy if I'm seeing other people, and I'm not going to be happy if I'm only allowed to see you. Like, so it's just not we're not compatible romantically, and that's okay, so we can just be friends. So he texted me this morning, though, that he wanted to try things again and be romantic. He said, I really believe we could have found a way for a romantic relationship to work that met both of our needs, which I'm interested to talk to him about what that is, because I don't know that we can. Like, he was very firmly pro-monogamy and I was very firmly pro-polyamory. So I'm interested for him to unpack that a little bit, because I don't really know what he has in mind. And, like, he knows that we had in-depth discussions about how I'm not changing my relationship style. So I don't know if he means he's willing to try polyamory, because I don't necessarily, the other thing that concerns me about this text message is I think he really, really, really likes me. And I really, really like him too. But I think he might like me so much that he's willing to do a relationship style that might not be healthiest for him. And I don't want him to do that, and that's, it's hard. Like on our episode where we talked about the difference between romantic feelings and platonic feelings of love, I do think romantic feelings make you do illogical, crazy things. And I kind of think that might be what he's doing. Like, I kind of think his feelings might be so strong that he's like, even though I am a jealous, monogamous person, yeah, I could be happy in polyamory. And like, maybe, but I really don't know. Like, I was very convinced by the time we ended things that like this man is monogamous and that's totally fine. It's just we're not going to work out romantically. So the novel I got from him this morning definitely threw me for a loop, because I was like, I thought we had firmly agreed this wasn't going to work. And I don't want to let him sacrifice his own happiness to try and satiate me just because he wants to be with me. And I don't know, Jenny Bear, what do I do?
Have you, and this is probably just a very Jen approach, but have you perchance lent him your copy of The Ethical Slut? Because there is a lot of work in there on like jealousy and tactics for that. And like,
so currently my copy of The Ethical Slut, I've lent out The Ethical Slut to so many people. You were the first person I lent it out to, but then I lent it out to one of the women I was dating, the one who, when I told her I was polyamorous, was like, you're gonna cheat on me. And I was like, that's not what polyamory is. So I lent it to her, but she never read it and we ended up breaking up, but meh, anyway. And currently I have it lent out to one of my best friend's moms, because she wanted to read it. And it's interesting getting it from her perspective, because she is probably a similar age to the author, so a lot of it resonated with her because she lived through a lot of the things that they talk about in the book, and she's really enjoyed it so far. But she still has it, and I don't think she's finished it yet. But maybe when she's done, I'll lend it out to Fred.
I mean, when I did my presentation on polyamory, like a lot of people asked about jealousy, and I was like, I mean, it is a very personal journey, and like I'm not an expert in it, but there are a lot of resources out there. And someone also asked, they were like, are there just polyamorous and monogamous people? And I was like, well, I don't know. My presentation was basically Sex at Dawn, which like lays out the anthropological and biological evidence for why our species was/is a promiscuous/polyamorous species. And so I was like, it seems like our species very well could do it, but societal influences are very strong and powerful and difficult to overcome. So, I mean, I just don't know. I think I talked about, I was like, I think I am, I think people who are like less prone to like jealousy are probably more attracted to polyamory than others. But as to like, can people who strongly identify as monogamous become non-monogamous? I mean, I think in an ideal world, yes. Do we necessarily have all the tools and support structures for that now? I don't know.
That is the hard thing. I do think, I mean, society is hard to break away from, because like, I mean, society is the water we swim in. It's all around us, and oftentimes we can't see it because it's just so deeply embedded into who we are, and it does make it hard to like untangle who would we be without society and who are we. And it's not that, I don't think society is necessarily all bad. I know I complain on this podcast and in real life a lot about how society, but it's really just because I am frustrated with the current society I am in. Like, society itself is not a bad thing. Like, I think it's good that we all come together and kind of agree on social norms and rules. Like, that's what brings us, safety and security, and keeps, chaos from reigning. Although chaos is fun sometimes. Every now and then chaos is enjoyable. But I do think like coming together and constructing rules and norms that we all agree are good is a helpful thing that brings us some security and safety. But it's hard to get everybody to agree on those rules, right? And a lot of times, a lot of other people agree on a rule that you're like, I don't really like that. And then what do you do? And I think monogamy is one of those things where society has come together and been like, yeah, monogamy, we want to do this. But, there's this growing percentage of the population that is polyamorous that's looking at that rule and being like, that seems like a dumb rule that doesn't really work for us. What if we didn't do that? So
yeah, well, I actually just finished a reading this morning on kind of a study on polyamory, further research directions to be taken, and it was assigned for the psychology class I'm taking by my professor, who is amazing, and so poly validating, it is so amazing. But it was basically the summary of the article was people are biased against polyamory, especially in research. Based on our research, it seems like a completely valid relationship style. Yeah.
That's such a good transition into what I also wanted to talk about, which was my experience coming out as polyamorous versus coming out as, I currently identify as pansexual, but at the time when I was coming out to people as queer, bisexual was the label I was using.
Well, I guess before you talk about that, the definitions of bisexual and pansexual is bisexual is liking more than one gender, whereas pansexual refers to liking people regardless of gender. And when I found the term pansexual, I was like, yes, this is what I am. And I made a TikTok about it because this was the part of the pandemic where I was so bored. I was like, I'm just going to start making TikToks. And so I made a TikTok about being pansexual, and it blew up a little bit because people started getting into comment wars about pansexual invalidates bisexuality. And so that happened. And so I called my friend in California who I knew was bisexual, which you also identified as bisexual at the time. I don't remember if I texted you at the time, but I called her and I was like, is pansexuality an invalid thing? And does it invalidate bisexuals? And she was like, no, it's fine. But a lot of people think that it does because a lot of people think that pansexuality is saying that bisexuality is a-binary and therefore makes it non-binary phobic and transphobic, whereas, even though it probably did start out as, bisexual, too, because we had, it was invented 100 years ago. So there was a very much more limited view on sexuality and gender, but neither bisexuality nor pansexuality are transphobic or any other kind of phobic. There may be people who identify as bisexual or pansexual who are phobic in some ways, but that's not what it is. The thing that I like about pansexuality is probably related to demisexuality, but it's not any aspect of the person besides their personality. I don't care about your genitalia, orientation, or your gender. I just fall in love with people. And maybe that's demisexuality. I like pansexuality as a label. But yes, anyway, continue.
Yeah. And it's totally fine for labels to shift and change over your lifetime too. I was watching this TikTok about somebody was saying just it's okay to have a different label every 3 days. And we've kind of touched on this with you identify as non-binary, but you also use the term woman and you use, feminine pronouns, and that's fine. You are allowed to do that. And if it confuses people, it's on them to figure it out, not you. Everybody goes through their own journey.
Yeah, well, something I also liked is when I was doing a lot of the research about asexual/aromanticism, I saw this video and the guy was like, I think labels are useful for describing past behavior, not necessarily present or future behavior. And I was like, yeah, that's totally valid because who the fuck knows what's happening in the future or even the present and barely the past too. So honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we could wake up tomorrow and all of a sudden be that's actually something I've been worrying about is Zach and I have been getting a lot closer recently, and because of that I've been spending most of my time with him, and I've been kind of scared. I'm what if I wake up tomorrow and I decide I think I'm monogamous and I only want to be with him? Oh God, where does this podcast go? What do we do? But I don't think that's really gonna happen. I very much like Rick as well.
I mean, as you're talking about, labels are very fluid, and if there's a time period where it's I only want to be with this one person, you have every right to. And the whole point with polyamory is doing what you want and need. And if it's at this time, this guy has all I need, then hell yeah, fam, fucking do it. It's all about consent and honest openness, which is why if you don't identify with it, like, that's fine, but like, I don't understand how you have any philosophical arguments against it. Hold on, I'm going to pull up this study that I just finished and look at my highlights, because one thing they did mention was like, you know, I don't know if I will call it perk, an aspect of monogamy is that it is hypothetically more stable. It can also just be a difference of values. Like, if you highly value stability,
I think people can and do correctly identify as monogamous, which is what has me concerned about Fred, because I think he can and correctly does identify as monogamous, but is willing to sacrifice that because he likes me.
Anyway, the quote to read you. So essentially they was talking about how, like, they described it as more turmoil because, like, polyamory is not as scripted or as set or as, you know, normative, because it's just not as well practiced in society. And so they describe that as having relationship turmoil, which, like, I'm not sure if I love the connotation of that word, but like, I can understand what they're trying to say. And so this is the quote that I really like. So the study is called Investigation of Consensually Non-Monogamous Relationships. So they say consensually non-monogamous instead of ethically non-monogamous. Theories, methods, and new directions. In polyamory, the individual has to contend with substantially more relationship drama and turmoil. Again, negatively connotated words, but like, they're just saying less stability. Within monogamy, the threat to the relationship is boredom. So there is a trade-off. I guess, you know, it just depends on what you value. I highly value authenticity. But I also, it's funny because I hate uncertainty. I love certainty. I'm a planner. I love knowing things. But at the same time, like, I value authenticity so much more that I would rather have a quote unquote tumultuous relationship than have a boring monogamous one.
I do like that kind of, I mean, there are different kinds of people, right? Like, there are people who value stability enough that they're willing to have more boredom if it means they have more stability. And then there are people who are the opposite and they're like, no, I need to have variety and adventure, and I'm willing to sacrifice a little stability to do so. And it's probably a bit of a spectrum too, because I think everything is a spectrum, but I definitely think you and I are on the polyamorous end of that spectrum, and we're like, we'd rather have variety and adventure and authenticity, and we're willing to sacrifice a little bit of stability to get that. Whereas I think society tells people, no, we want stability, which makes sense. I mean, like, society is constructed to give people stability. So I do understand why society would be on the side of monogamy, because it is a more stable structure. But
I mean, polyamory, you know, if we introduce it into society, would develop these, you know, norms and scripts. And like, I mean, maybe not, because like, maybe that's just incompatible with the fundamental thing of polyamory, but like, it could, you know, have more support and people could have more education about it.
Polyamory can be just as stable as monogamy, I think, because like, there's a very famous throuple right now of 3 men who are all married to each other. I think in the state of New York is the one that recognizes it.
It was California.
It's California. Okay.
Yeah.
But they just adopted a child, and they are doing, I mean, from the outside looking in, it appears that they are doing basically the same thing a typical monogamous family would do. There's just 3 of them instead of 2. And I think that's...
I don't think it was necessarily adoption. I think they used a surrogate.
Okay. They have a child, regardless of...
Maybe it was like partial adoption, but all 3 guys got put on the birth certificate. Was the
on the birth certificate. Oh, that's nice. Awesome. Yay. Anyway, back to the original point that I had wanted to discuss when you were talking about your study of how polyamory is very frowned upon. I have had such a different experience coming out as polyamorous than I had coming out as bisexual. Because when I came out as bisexual, most people were like, oh yeah, we knew, like, that's not a surprise, like, that totally makes sense for you. Like, nobody, I didn't get any negative reactions. And I'm very privileged to have that perspective, because I know that people definitely do get negative reactions. And I did have an experience where one of our aunts was visiting, and she was talking about how she's relatively, well, I don't know, she's kind of liberal, but she's also very religious. I don't know, she's an interesting combination of identities. But she was talking about how she used to be very homophobic, but she has since met some gay people, I think, and decided, oh, it's okay. So she was talking about how, oh, I used to be homophobic, but I'm not anymore. And so I was like, oh, maybe I could come out to her. And like, I was it was on the tip of my tongue. I was about to do it. And then she was like, but you know what I don't get is those bisexuals. Like, you gotta pick one. And then I was like, and back in the closet. All right, not coming out to you. Got it. But other than that experience, I have been very privileged to, by and large, have very, very positive reactions when I came out as bisexual to people. When I started coming out as polyamorous, whole different ballgame. People were super thrown, super confused. Like, what does that mean? I don't understand. And the wild thing is, I really expected their reactions to be similar to when I came out as bisexual, because I have been operating as a polyamorous being for like the past decade. Like, I've always had lovers throughout the country. I've always been with multiple people. Like, I kind of thought when I came out as polyamorous, people would be like, oh yeah, no, you've been doing that. That makes sense. But they didn't. It was the entirely opposite reaction, which threw me, because at the time when I came out as bisexual, I had like kissed some women. I'd made out with some women. I'd probably felt some boobs, but I hadn't done very much with other women. Like, I have had sex with women now, but at the time I came out as bisexual, I was very hesitant to even have that identity, because I was like, can I be bisexual if I've only had sex with men? Does it count? Which, yes, it does. That was, again, internalized homophobia. But yeah, when I came out as bisexual, I thought people would be surprised and invalidating because I hadn't had sex with a woman. But when I came out as polyamorous, I was like, I've been polyamorous this whole time. I just wasn't calling it that. So surely people will be understanding. But no, it's been the entire opposite. Like, people are confused. They're like, are you sure? Like, have you thought about, like, I have gotten more of the stereotypical, like, negative reactions from coming out as polyamorous than I did coming out as bisexual. Even so, my one monogamous serious adult partner ever, Sebastian, I came out to him as polyamorous this past week because we were catching up over FaceTime. And again, he knows about my past relationship history. Like, he was the only person I was really ever monogamous with. I've basically been polyamorous for about 10 years, and I took a half year off when I dated him. So I did not think he'd be surprised. But when I came out to him, he was like, oh, I think you're like the first polyamorous person I've ever met. And I was like, I mean, maybe, but also we went to a very, very liberal college where I guarantee there were other polyamorous people. So I was like, I doubt I'm the first person you've met, but I might be the one you're closest to, but like, I don't know. But he was like very thrown aback and confused. And I was like, I don't get why this is surprising to you. Like, you know who I've been before and after you. I don't understand why this identity would surprise you at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we talked about, and at this point, I don't know if it's last episode or 2 episodes ago, that, you know, when I came out to a potential therapist, that therapist had a very negative reaction, and I felt very invalidated until I came here and talked to Lizzie, and she, you know, helped me remember that we are valid.
That's what I'm here for as a big sister.
But I mean, I don't know, it's hard to say if I, like, came out to like Leah and Danny, because I think before like I started, you know, really identifying with, I was just discussing it as like a really interesting theoretical concept, because like I was like, oh my god, this idea is so cool, and so I discussed it with them, and then like pretty soon I was like, yeah, no, this is me. They took me identifying with it fine. Neither of them yet identify as it, but I mean, as Danny mentioned one time, he was like, I think our entire relationship is just you having these crazy ideas and me slowly being converted to them. And I was like, that's what I'm here to do.
That's what I'm here for. Turn the whole world gay. The gay agenda.
The poly agenda. But what you said about people being surprised about it, despite the fact that you like practice it, is when I gave my poly presentation in class the other day, one of the questions people asked was, they were like, I think people see, you know, polyamory or like what you were doing as like, you know, something you do while you're young until you settle down, even if they don't call it polyamory. And she was like, so do you know, like, do people actually do this throughout their lives? And I was like, yes, like I've seen lots of it. You know, I've talked to people about it. The authors of the Ethical Slut, you know, are much older. So like, yes, it doesn't exist. But I think probably why you practicing it and, you know, not getting any flack for it as opposed to identifying it is, you know, people just think this is a phase you're going through, which is another thing that people use to invalidate identities. But so people probably just think, oh, Lizzie's just young and wild and free, but she'll settle down eventually. Whereas when you say, no, this is a stable thing, people are like, well, that conflicts with my views. So I imagine that's probably why. But I mean, yeah, I think polyamory is one of I'm not going to say it's a newer thing, because like also, polyamory has been around for 10,000 years, but it's the thing that's kind of moving into the spotlight now. And so we're just kind of on that rough frontier area.
Yeah, it's still in its very, very frontier phases of becoming accepted in society. But I don't know. I mean, everything's been there at times, and I think this will just, someday I think people will be as okay with polyamory as they are with being gay now. And that's not going to be everybody. I mean, there are still homophobes out there who are very opposed to being gay, but I had a friend the other day. I was talking about how there's some very regressive legislation in our state for LGBTQ rights. And my friend was like, okay, but being gay is accepted enough now that if we actually passed any of that legislation, like, people would not have it. There's no way. And I think he's wrong. Like, I think gay rights are still threatened right now. Like, I don't think he's right. But it was interesting to me because he's not as interwoven into like gender theory as we are. So I think he represents more of like the normal, typical American population than we do. So it was interesting to me that he was like, being gay is not even up for debate now. Like, we're fine with that. Gay marriage is not going to be outlawed again. Like, we're not doing that. Which I do think there's still a risk. Like, I think if we don't stand up and fight for it, there are still risks that, we could. Some of the Supreme Court does want to undo gay marriage. So there are still things that are at risk. But he's right that it is more accepted nowadays, and it's more mainstream. Like, you don't find as many people, especially publicly, saying that they're homophobic, right? So I think someday polyamory will also get there, and people will at least not publicly be like, polyamorous people are cheaters and whores.
Yeah, and I mean, as you've been saying, like in this study that I read, they talked about how like polyamory is like a marginalized group, and how like in just trying to even study polyamory, it's super hard because like not everybody's just going to come out and say, yeah, I'm poly, which is interesting because a woman reached out to us about a documentary they want to make on polyamory and about helping to find people for it. And Liz and I were like, well, first, like there's the aspect of like, do we trust this production company to like not do a shitty job of it, but also like finding people, it's like we're not even out publicly.
Yeah, that's what we told her. We were like, we were willing to participate in the documentary with just our voices, but we didn't want to show our faces. And she was like, that's the issue we're having. Like, we really want to have faces on the documentary, but like a lot of people don't want to show their faces. And I'm like, yeah, it's just, maybe someday I'll be comfortable with it. But like right now, it's still so stigmatized that I think for us, there's more to lose than we would gain from putting our faces on this podcast and like just coming out in general.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm young, wild, and free and idealistic. So, I mean, honestly, I would be fine with like showing my face and like doing it. But at the same time, especially with polyamory, it's like, if I'm going to do it, all of my partners have to be okay with it too.
That's the other thing too.
And so it's like, that's hard.
Yeah. With polyamory, outing yourself also outs other people. And both of my current partners right now, Rick and Zach, are very introverted and don't like attention. And interestingly, when I approached them about doing the documentary potentially, Zach, who was the one I was more afraid was going to be like, heck no, I hate attention, I'm not going to do it. Zach was actually open to using his voice. Like, he said if we did the documentary, he would be willing to like speak on it, but he also didn't want to like show his face. And Rick was actually the one who was more like, I don't think so. But yeah, it's hard because it's not just us you have to think about when coming out, because it inevitably outs all of your partners. Also, with this podcast in particular, like, it outs our parents and our siblings, and we've talked about their identities and their beliefs on this podcast, and most of them, our mother does listen to the podcast, so hopefully she's okay with everything. But if we were to reveal our identities, it would also reveal who our parents are, and that would, I mean, our mother isn't even on social media expressly for the reason that she doesn't like that form of attention, and she doesn't really want her life to be out there publicly.
We have a theory that she's hiding from the Russian mafia. Yeah, but whatever cover story she wants to say.
So she does have a Facebook account with a fake name just so she can use like the Messenger app to like message us. But it's so funny how like scared she is of like having her face on social media at all.
I don't know. It's different because like she lets us post photos of her, sure.
That's true.
But like she just does not want an account. And she was like, I don't know, somebody's hunting her, obviously.
Clearly they are. I don't.
So yeah, I mean, I guess circling way back, are you wanting, I don't know, I guess I called you because it sounded like you wanted to process a lot. So are you just going to have a conversation with Fred?
I think I'm going to meet with him and I'm going to talk to him. And I'm torn because he's an adult and he is fully autonomous and capable of making his own choices. So if he really thinks he could be comfortable and happy in polyamory, I don't want to, tell him, no, you can't, because maybe he could. But I am very worried he's only saying this because he really likes me and he's going to be sacrificing a lot of his own happiness in terms of relationship style because he just wants to be with me. So I don't want to take away his autonomy and be like, I know better than you do, and I know that you're monogamous and you're not going to be happy, so we're not doing this. Like, I don't want to do that, but I also kind of do want to do that because I do kind of think, I don't know, I don't want to say I know better than people, but I am nervous that he's only doing this because he really, really likes me, and I don't want him to sacrifice who he is so he can be with me,
Yeah, so I guess something that I haven't really mentioned, that I didn't really mention to you and hadn't really mentioned to, so I guess hadn't mentioned on the podcast, but like I was talking to this guy named Roger who I met on Hinge, but then he's in the military and he had to go far away. So I have never met this person in person. We I don't know, it was the best conversation I'd had on Hinge, and like we talked really easily. And so we moved to Messenger, which was the big step of the relationship. But I probably about a week ago kind of just cut things off because Leah was like, Jen, you're not okay. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And it was so interesting because it was such a roller coaster. And as I've mentioned, I've never really had a quote unquote traditional romantic relationship. I have a lot of feelings about what is romantic, what is not. I still don't really know. I don't have answers. But so I was messaging him and I was like, he was very clear. He's like, yeah, no, I really like you. Like, you seem so cool. And I was like, okay. And it was very easy for me to talk with him. So I was like, okay, yeah, no, this is cool. But then I don't know. I told him I was polyamorous and he was like, okay, I don't identify as that right now, but I'm, super down to learn about it and work on it. And I was like, okay, because, obviously being poly is not, a very widespread thing. So I was like, okay, he sounds like he's open to it. So we can do this. So that was fine. I don't know, maybe we also could have run into the thing where, he really wasn't fine with it. Again, I've never met this person in person, so it's hard to tell. But I think something kind of the reason that I stopped talking with him was because I was worried that I think what it ultimately comes down to is I don't know that I felt the click necessarily with him. I was like, I can talk with you pretty easily and you seem, really cool. We're very compatible in lots of views and beliefs, but I just don't think we click. And so it was very hard because it was me being there's no reason I should not like this person. And for a couple of days, I do think I did really like him but I think that was a lot of just novelty and oh, someone likes me. And so I was so when I ended things with him, I was like, I don't know. I don't feel like it's working and I just need time to process these things. And if I figure it out, I guess I'll message you, but don't expect anything. So yeah, which I mean, all of these thoughts are probably reflected in the podcast we were recording because I was thinking what is romance? What is attraction? Yeah, I don't know. I think we may have just been too similar is kind of my theory. We agreed on a lot of things and we, vibed in a lot of ways, but like there just wasn't that, I don't know, I described it as like click connection, chemistry, I don't know. So yeah, so I stopped talking with him and I feel super bad because like he was really into me. But I think also it was like, and I don't know, I told him like the thing that made me think about it was you described Fred as sending you a novel, and like I sent that kid like 3 novels over the course of our texting. So like I was very open, and like in being polyamorous, I was like, my thing is being very honest, open communication. So I don't remember if I told him about this, but I also felt just like I don't know, I described it, it felt like sticky when I thought about like interacting with him. I was like, and okay, so this is probably valid. I don't know if this is a real thing, but what I felt like, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but what I was feeling was like, I felt like he was depending on me too much for like validation. Like I felt like, because he said a lot of time, he was like, oh, you're so out of my league and like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I guess that's kind of flattering, but also like, I don't know, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
I just felt like he thought that like me being into him, like I described it as like loving my love instead of loving me. And so I feel like that was kind of at the core of it, which like, I don't know if it was like, I've never met this person, but like, it just felt like, I don't know, that's just what I was feeling. And I was like, there's no reason like on paper for me to dislike you. Like you are a great person and like we vibe, but at the same time, like I don't want to describe it as clingy, but it just felt he was like holding on to me for like dear life. And I was like, I can't breathe. Like I gotta go.
I think I really like how you articulated that, because I think I had a very similar experience with Fred. And when we were together, I did kind of feel like he was relying on me for his own personal happiness. Because I remember he was always much more communicative than I was. Like he would send me like 17 texts a day and I would be like, crap, I gotta respond to all these. Like every time I check my phone, I'm not on my phone all day. I'm sorry. But like I will be off of my phone and I'll spend 2 hours studying or playing with my cats or watching Netflix, which is still a screen, but whatever. But like I'm not on my phone all day. I'm sorry. But like I remember I would almost have anxiety for like checking my phone, because every time I check my phone, I would have like a Facebook message and an Instagram message and a text from him. And I was like, and it did get to a point where I was like, I feel like he's relying on me more so than is healthy. And I remember one time we met up to take a masked outdoor COVID safe walk together. And he told me that he had had a bad week because I hadn't responded to him as much and as quickly as he would have liked. And I was like, oh, that was the moment when I knew. I was like, no. Like this can't, like, I'm not going to be on my phone all day for you. Like, and he wasn't asking me to, like, he was just articulating his feelings of like, he, had been having a rough week because he interpreted me not responding to him as quickly as me not liking him. And he acknowledged that like that was an interpretation issue that he needed to work out with himself. But yeah, I don't want people to be dependent upon me for their happiness. And I think I'm going to have to tell him no. I do really like him. He's a lovely human, but I think I am going to, when I talk to him, tell him that I don't think he's ready. Like, I think he is.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I think that goes back to what we were talking about, like self-love and how, I don't know, like that is, like you said, like that is possibly the most attractive thing. And I think it is a lot because I highly value authenticity. And like, if I feel like you are trying to mold yourself just so I'll like you, it's like, I don't want that. I want another human. I don't want a reflection of me.
On a lighter pivot. So I think I've talked to you about this before, but twins will often talk about how like they can feel when their twin is suffering and they go through very similar life experiences. And like sometimes when they had a bad week and they can't figure out why, it's because their twin was having a bad week. I feel like throughout our life, there have been a few times where like I've felt like I had that connection to you where like I remember in college a few times I was just like feeling sad and I didn't know why, and then I would call home and you would be like, oh yeah, I got a bad grade on a paper or something had happened, and I would be like, oh okay, that's why I've been off, like Jen's been having a sad week and that's why I'm sad. And I think it's so funny that we kind of had these very similar experiences dating recently, because like when you were talking about your experience with Roger, like everything you were saying was resonating with me of having had happened with Fred too. And I just hadn't really been able to like put it into words. And like when you were saying it, I was like, that's exactly how I feel and what happened. And like you talking about that made me realize like, yeah, I think I need to end things with him and it's not going to work romantically. So I just think it's funny that sister connection we have.
Yeah, that's interesting. Whenever I'm in a bad mood, I'll just be like, it's not my fault, it's Liz.
It could be me. It's entirely possible, yeah.
I don't know, something also with like, I think what we're going through was because your guy was the same Myers-Briggs type as you and my guy was the same Myers-Briggs type as me. Oh my God.
And we had the exact same experience. Why are our lives just like parallels of each other? This is crazy. Jen and I are both very scientifically minded people, but I do occasionally buy into the harmless, non-scientific line of thinking.
Yes, but anyway, something I was also thinking about when I was like, quote unquote, breaking up with, which, as I mentioned before, I don't like that term. And in the paper that I read, it was talking about how like polyamorous people don't necessarily so much like, see ends to relationships, just kind of different formations. And I was like, yeah, like that totally makes sense. But anyway, when I was like trying to talk to Roger and be like, I don't think this is working, but I also, when I sent him the text, I was like, yeah, I don't think this is working. I also said, like, I'm not going to block you. Like, if you want to ask questions, talk to me. Like, we can work this out. Like, I'm like, you're still a cool guy. But so that's the thing I'm talking about. It's like when I was quote unquote breaking up or transforming our relationship, I kept being like, there's all these stereotypical lines of like, you're a really nice guy. And like Dad has said before, like, women don't like nice guys. And I was like, oh, I disagree. I think that Danny is a very nice guy. But I was trying to think, I was like, there's just not, not canny terminology to be like, I have no critiques of you as a person. We just don't vibe. We don't click. We don't have that connection. And that's fine. But like in this mononormative society we live in, and in the paper they talked about ending a relationship is seen as a failure. And it's like, it's not being compatible. Like, sure, if you could have been compatible and you were a shitty person and you could have done things better, maybe that's a failure. But like in general, I think it's just like, we don't vibe and that's okay. Like if we both tried our best, like, and it's not there, that's okay. And like, maybe you are a nice guy. You're just not the nice guy for me. But I do like nice guys. Nice guys do win.
2 partners I have right now, I would categorize both of them as very nice guys. Like, absolutely, they are super, super, super sweet to me. Like, I would, under no circumstances would I categorize them as not nice guys. Like, they're very kind.
Yeah, but anyway, so, yeah, I don't know. So that's why I, like, broke things off with Roger. And, like, it was really just because Leah was, like, she said to me, so we in the current apartment we have 2 twin beds, but we'll like go to bed and we'll just stay up talking. Like I schedule an hour after we like go to bed because like we just talk for like an hour about different things. But recently I've started the habit of we go to bed and for that hour where we're talking, I'll go to her bed and we'll cuddle because we need more physical touch than we get. And then I'll go sleep in my bed. So she said to me one night, she was like, I feel like I'm carrying all of our conversations. And like, whenever she would ask me, I was like, I don't know. I just feel weary in my soul. And she was like, okay, well, just let me know like if I can do anything. And like it was at that point, and I think it was just because I felt bad. I was like, I don't want to break, Roger's heart, but at the same time, like I just don't think this is going to work. And like, I was agonizing over it as I did when I was in 8th grade and I accidentally got into a relationship with a guy because I thought he was joking when he asked me out. And then I put off breaking up with him for a week and I was in similar agony. And also within that week, we mostly just texted, but he said he loved me in that week in 8th grade. And I was like, boy, what? But anyway, so similar feelings, but I do think it is just best if we part ways because it just did not seem to be working. And I have noticed I feel so much better. Like, I just feel less anxious and like overwhelmed and guilty and like in my head. And I was like, yeah, this was the right choice. And it was hard also because I was thinking about like, because it was so hard because I was like, this guy is like pretty perfect. So like, there's no reason I shouldn't like him. And so that sent me into a spiral of like, do I just have emotional trauma, or like, am I aromantic, asexual? Like, so it just sent me into a whole tailspin that like, I think at the end was just like, you're just not meant to be with this guy. And I was like, okay, I've accepted that.
Yeah, it's sad though. It's hard because, I mean, you don't want to make people feel sad, but you also don't want to have the responsibility of, being in charge of their emotions, right? So like,
but I mean, it put me through, I went through a lot of self-reflection, and I was like, if I get nothing out of this, I've learned about myself. So
learning is good. Also, funny thing, I was watching this TikTok, and there's a stereotype about lesbians in particular that like are willing to drive ridiculous distances to find love. Like, straight people will be like, "Oh, you're an hour away. Too far. No, it's too much effort." Lesbians will be like, "Oh, 16 hours? Yeah, no, I can swing that in a day for sure. Like, let's meet up this weekend." And that reminded me so much of when Roger told you he was like 6 hours away, and you were like, "That's not too bad." And I was like, "Jen, that's pretty substantial." I mean, it's doable, but like, it's a lot.
Yeah. And like, I think that also just should have been a red flag where like he was talking about, he was like, oh, when I do come, the reason he had said on his profile that he was in my city was because he's going to be there in the fall to go to school. And he was like, oh, like, when I come there, like, I'll have the stipend from the military and like I can get an apartment, like you could move in. And I was like, and he was like,
it's a lot.
I'm sure I facilitated this a little bit because I was also, I don't know, like I just got caught up in it, but like it just was very fast, and that probably should have just been a sign of like, I don't think this is good. But yeah, anyway, that's all I pretty much wanted to talk about. That's the emotional journey I went through.
We've been on the same emotional journeys together.
We apparently have.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast app.
If you really like us, like us, send this episode to a friend, family member, partner, your boss, anyone else in your social circle, the people you want to convert to polyamory. Start a conversation.
Feel free to send us any comments or questions over social media.
So thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.